Hello everyone, and welcome back. America's special war strategy began in May 1961. Designed by two key minds, Egan Starley, an economist at Stanford's Research Institute, and General Maxwell Taylor. The plan followed this formula: the Army of the Republic of Vietnam, plus American advisors, plus American weapons and aid. Together they were supposed to pacify Vietnam within 18 months. But the plan collapsed, because the backbone of that strategy was the so-called strategic hamlets. These hamlets were modeled after something the US had tried in the Philippines, where it seemed to work. Washington thought, if it worked there, it will work in Vietnam. But that assumption was a fatal mistake. Vietnamese villagers had no desire to abandon their ancestral homes and move into barbed wire compounds where entering or leaving was tightly controlled. Weddings, funerals, even daily gatherings were restricted, and anyone who didn't comply could end up blacklisted, or worse. Historian Randy Roberts later described it bluntly: the so-called strategic hamlet program was basically rounding up Vietnamese farmers and locking them in fortified camps that looked more like prisons than real communities. With that failure, the special war strategy collapsed, and the US had to escalate to search and destroy combat operations, what they called the War of Attrition. This time, instead of relying on the South Vietnamese Army, Washington deployed American combat troops directly, along with forces from allied nations. Starting March 8, 1965, U.S. Marines landed at Da Nang, and their numbers grew fast, eventually peaking at nearly 1 million, including allied troops. Now imagine the challenge. The People's Army of Vietnam had around 200,000 troops in total, armed mostly with outdated weapons, facing nearly 1 million Americans and allies with the most modern equipment on Earth. On paper, it looked impossible. That's why General Secretary Le Duan set the strategy: the People's Army of Vietnam cannot defeat the Americans outright, they are too strong. But we can make sure they cannot swallow us. If they choke, they'll be forced to spit us out. The logic was clear. The US, being rich and powerful, was used to short wars, 3 years, maybe 5, but never dragging on forever. So the People's Army of Vietnam had to fight a protracted war, wearing them down slowly. That was the strategy. But the real questions were: where to strike, when to strike, how to strike. The answer came in 1968, at Khe Sanh. Why there? Because Khe Sanh was the eye of America's McNamara Line, the electronic barrier meant to block reinforcements coming from the north into the south. Smashing Khe Sanh would punch a hole through that barrier. Why 1968? Timing. If the People's Army struck earlier, even a victory would just justify more American reinforcements. If they waited too long, the US would face no pressure, especially after the presidential election. But 1968 was election year, the perfect moment to hit and shake American politics. Thus, 1968 became the year of the general offensive and uprising. But even then, the Army had to decide the exact day and method. They chose the Lunar New Year, Tet, a moment no American general expected. Westmoreland believed there was a 60% chance the Vietnamese would attack before Tet, 40% after Tet, and 0 chance during the holiday itself. CIA Chief Philip Davidson agreed. He thought Tet would be used to regroup, not to strike. That miscalculation left the US dangerously unprepared. And then it happened. The People's Army of Vietnam attacked. In Saigon, even the US Embassy, the so-called White House of the East, the nerve center of America's war effort, was stormed and occupied for 6 straight hours. President Johnson himself exclaimed, "The Viet Cong have walked into our embassy." It was a turning point. And yet the question remains: why did the US respond so weakly at first? We'll answer that in the next episode. Thank you for watching today's discussion. If you enjoyed this, please leave your thoughts in the comments below. Until next time, goodbye, and take care.